All right, good evening, everyone. I'm just waiting for more attendees to join, so we will begin in a few minutes. And I have just made our guest speaker, Melanie Bennet, a panelist, so now you can see her and hopefully hear her. And I will introduce her in a few moments.
Can you hear me? Just testing.
Yes, I can hear you. And if anyone cannot hear us, feel free to please let us know in the chat. All right, everyone. Without any further ado, we'll begin. So my name is Celine Trainer. I'm the Communications Director for Parents as First Educators. I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar. We're very excited to be able to host Melanie here as a guest speaker, and she is very eager to sharing lots of great, important stories with you today. As you may know, Melanie is a journalist, an investigative journalist with True North or Juno News, and she specializes in the investigation of issues with school board, wokeism, things to do with LGBTQ plus wokeism. Oh, I already said that, but gender, and especially when it comes to schools, but also with regard to the medical industry. So that emailer that was sent out last week revealing all of the Nova Scotia transgender clinic information, that was actually her investigation. So we're very happy to be able to have her as our guest speaker today. And I will just hand it over to Melanie.
Okay, lovely. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's given me an opportunity to take take account of the work I've been doing recently. So I'm going to start by just sharing my presentation because I'm going to run through some of the reporting that I've been doing. So let's try this. Is that showing?
I can see it. And like I said, if anybody is unable to see, or if you just want to give us confirmation that you can see Melanie's screen share, please feel free to chat. But I am able to see, so I'm hoping that all of our participants can as well.
Okay, well, thank you. And yes, my beat has been called the woke beat, which I think is fantastic because we hear a lot. Well, we heard a lot since Trump was elected in the USA that woke is dead. And I'm here, unfortunately, to uh, show you that it absolutely is not dead. It's very well ingrained and it's continuing on. And that is my job. My job is to bring that forward. And I will talk to you about most of the reporting that I've been doing. So I'm actually new to True North. I've been there since the end of May. And so I'll be focusing on some of the reporting that I've been doing since the end of May, because there's a little bit too much to cover if I go much beyond that. Most of this stuff is going to be Ontario focused because that is where I live and that's what I'm used to. However, I feel like Ontario, especially Toronto, is the hub of most of these things. And so some of these things are probably happening in your province if you're not from Ontario, or they will be coming to your province. And so this might give you an idea of what to pay attention to. But it is Ontario focused, so I hope that's okay. I do have one story that's not. Celine mentioned it. That was Nova Scotia. But let's get onto it, shall we? So I'm going to take you through what I am finding with the Ministry of Education and just the education system in general. And again, refocus on the idea that woke is perhaps not dead. And so we're going to start by looking at a department that some people are possibly less familiar with, which is the Education Equity Secretariat, which I'll explain in a little bit. I'll then talk to you about the beat that I have, the reporting that I've been doing, several stories that I think might be of interest to the listeners today. And then we'll talk about Bill 33, which some of you may or may not be aware of. It's the bill that the Ontario Minister Paul Calandra has put in place or suggested. I don't believe it's been even argued in the legislature yet to take control of the school boards in Ontario, a select few school boards. So there's a lot happening on that front. And I think that people are getting perhaps the wrong impression of what Bill 33 is, what it does, and what it doesn't do. And then I'll just briefly talk about what is on the horizon. So first of all, let's discuss the Equity Secretariat. As you might imagine, It is a department within the Ministry of Education. If you can see here, this is an old organizational chart, but it's just to give you an idea. So here it says Minister Stephen Lecce as the minister. Obviously, we have Paul Calandra now, but these departments are still similar. And so the Education Equity Secretariat, which has this red arrow kind of going to it, which I'll explain in a minute. This doesn't have anything underneath it, and it is right underneath the deputy minister. So it's a very high position. It's a very important department. And I will argue that this is actually where the woke curriculum, the trans curriculum, where the requirement to keep secrets from parents, all of this stuff, the crazy race stuff, this is essentially where it's coming from. There are some other areas that it's coming from, but mostly I will argue that it's actually coming from this department. The person who used to run this department is the man pictured. This is Patrick Case. The reason I bring Patrick Case up is to explain the Equity Secretariat. In 2017, so let me start from the beginning, actually. You see there's a TDSB and OHRC here. So Patrick Case began his career in the late 60s, early 70s, and he was elected as a TDSB trustee on the Communist Party ticket when you could still run on a political party's ticket. So he's actually Communist Party. That's how he started, just to give you an idea. He spent many decades at the TDSB putting in place things like equity in work. There was some anti-racism stuff, early anti-racism stuff. It's all rooted in this early version of what we might call woke now. Then he went to the Ontario Human Rights Commission after becoming a human rights lawyer. And then from there, he then joined the Minister of Education in 2017. This role, the Education Equity Secretariat, was developed specifically for Patrick Case. You need to be aware, just because this will come up a little bit later on, the reason there's a little red line here, or the double arrow, is because while he was at the Education Equity Secretariat, Patrick Case was also the director, I think he was the director of a human rights and leadership course at York University. So there's a bit of a relationship going on here between his role in developing courses for human rights training for education leaders and his role as the Education Equity Secretariat requiring this kind of training. So just keep that in mind. So that was all put in place, this thing called the Equity Action Plan in 2017. So the woke stuff that we're seeing now is all laid out in 2017 in this action plan. It talks about things like culturally responsive pedagogy, which comes up again and again and again. This is a requirement from the ministry. So when we're talking about this crazy anti-racism stuff, and even to a certain degree, the trans stuff, it's because of this culturally responsive pedagogy, which is kind of a code word for critical race theory. And when we talk about critical race theory, it's not just race. It includes all of the things, decolonial, trans, everything. All the woke things are kind of imbibed within this culturally responsive pedagogy. So it's the applied version of intersectional critical race theory. If you're aware of the Richard Bilkstow case, just to mention, Patrick Case was actually involved in investigating that case, and that will never come to light because it's been shelved for legal reasons, but we'll get to that. So this came up through some FOIs.
Melanie, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask if you're able to put the presentation onto play mode so that it's just larger and we can see it better.
How's that working?
Oh, perfect. Much better. Thank you so much.
Is that better?
Yes, I saw that someone put that in the Q&A, and also I was thinking the same thing. So thank you very much.
Okay, beautiful. Oh, I forgot to put on my timer. Just give me 2 seconds. So I reported on this, what I just described, this relationship with Patrick Case while he was I'm gonna have to go quiet for a sec because I just need to put this timer on real quick. Okay. Otherwise, I'll go on forever. Okay, sorry about that. So like I said, he was at York University at Osgoode Hall, and he was also at the Ministry of Education. And through some FOI work, we have this invoice here where it says Osgoode Hall Certificate in Human Rights Education. I confirmed with the university, was he still the director of this role? And they said, yes, there's no conflict of interest, they said, which I'm still investigating. But yeah, so in a nutshell, to explain it very simply, he was a director of a course charging school boards whilst being at the Ministry of Education and requiring this course to be taken by leadership. So you see, there's a bit of a, in my opinion, a bit of a conflict of interest in the situation, but we'll see if that comes out in the wash, as they say. And that particular FOI, so that invoice was part of a much larger FOI with the Durham District School Board, which also revealed some other interesting information where this particular school board, we asked wanting to see all of the invoices for DEI projects. Now, anti-racism was specifically named, and so we did receive a lot of responses about anti-racism specifically. And what it revealed is that nearly, $639,000 was spent over the course of a few years on anti-racism training just for leadership at this particular school board. Now, the interesting thing here is that the vast majority of that, nearly $500,000, was spent on this one consultant. Her name is Nicole West Brown, which is this tweet here. And I can't play this tweet, but if this gets shared around, I'll put a link into it. But it is the most woke stuff. She's, it's about segregating people by race. It's extremely Marxist. And this person was paid $500,000 to do this. Now, I found this person at multiple other boards, and so I'm currently trying to find out exactly how much money did this one person receive from school boards in Ontario. And this article, Secretive Ontario School Gender Clubs Teach Kids to Tell a Lie. This one, so the headline is a little bit, it doesn't give you the full detail. So this was sent to me by a member of the public. And oh, by the way, at the end, I'll give you my email. So if you have information in your own province that you want to share, I'll give you my email, because I get a lot of this information from members of the public who share with me what's going on. So there was this training for developing a new group called the Positive Space Club. Now, the Positive Space Club was framed as a replacement for the GSA or QSA or these types of clubs, but it's called the Positive Space Club. You might have seen it at your child's school. And it was a resource for teachers to set one up. This was at the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board. But as you can see, this is just an indication of what this really is. It's not just about gender and sexuality. There's an element to teaching kids how to become social justice activists, political activists, and there's a lot of language that really does kind of point to the Marxist element of that. So it's really basically what they're doing is they're using LGBT themes to teach kids to be activists, and they're training them in these clubs. And obviously, they have confidentiality scenarios, which is just another way of keeping secrets. What happens in Fight Club stays in Fight Club. So it's another way of teaching kids to keep secrets from their parents. And this one you might be aware of. That one went pretty viral. The Waterloo District School Board had this training, this pretty crazy training, saying that the nuclear family, I might add, not all families, but the nuclear family was a product of white supremacy that caused racialized students harm. And this is repeated throughout the different slides within this document. Most of the media only picked up on the family. The school board itself had to do a statement about a couple slides in the in this training that were in the article, but they were trying to say that it's not what I was alluding to, that this is not based in critical race theory. I don't know what I'm talking about. The CBC tried to say I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do know what I'm talking about. This was entirely rooted in critical race theory. The nuclear family is viewed in critical race theory scholarship as an oppressive force because it's a dominant force, but we don't need to go into that detail. I was actually removed from Twitter over publishing this article, which is why I have a new Twitter today, which I'm still trying to fight to get back. So this upset a lot of people, including some CBC journalists who didn't like that I was writing about this. But never mind, we'll bring you more of this stuff. And then again with the Waterloo District School Board, just recently this was published. This was actually, it says exclusive, but it actually came from a local parent group who'd published this and also sent it to me at the same time. And it was a series of lectures or classes The pink one was an English class, for example, and it's about, race, gender, sexuality, and so on and so forth to learn, relearn, unlearn what your parents might have taught you and to relearn what the teacher's telling you, all these social justice topics. You got the privilege walk. You even have Karl Popper's paradox of no tolerance of intolerance, right? Or take that further, Herbert Marcuse's no tolerance for movements from the right. So this is replacing regular English class. It's not just that they have maybe an extracurricular session. So that this teacher was replacing over a course of several weeks regular English with this social justice ideology, telling kids that they need to unlearn what they'd been taught and relearn this new propaganda. And I can't call it anything else but propaganda, having them do privilege walks and so on and so forth. But in the article, I provide the whole list or almost a whole series of these particular lessons. So some of you might be aware of Richard Bilkstow's story. If you're not, I'll just briefly go through it. He was a principal at the Toronto District School Board who, I believe it was in 2021, was put through a series of anti-racism training. And this is the kind of training that Nicole West Burns puts together. It was from Kojo Institute. It was very racist. It was accusing people of white supremacy. If you don't admit your white privilege, then you're racist. And it was just a very, very humiliating experience for Richard. He ended up having to go off on disability with WSIB, I believe. It was a whole thing. And in the end, unfortunately, committed suicide. And since then, the Toronto District School Board has been doing their very utmost to keep as much of this quiet as possible. This article was covering the costs that they were paying towards a private investigation firm. So it wasn't a third party that was impartial that was hired. It was a private investigation firm that was hired to defend basically the TDSB. So there was a report. I'll bring you back to Patrick Case. Patrick Case was also involved in this report, but when I contacted the TDSB, they informed me that they would not be unsealing this report at all due to legal reasons. But the public paid over $100,000 towards this King International, which is the private investigator. So we're paying public money to essentially cover up and not make public investigations on how some of their own training has led to the suicide of a teacher, of a principal. So this story is ongoing. I don't think anybody's going to let go of it, and I hope that eventually this comes out. The TDSB has been taken over, so who knows what's going to come out of that. This is fun. I attended I don't know how you could call it. So the union, the Elementary Teachers of Toronto, is a union. It's part of the ETFO, the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, which is a very large teachers union. They do training. I guess they had a training series, and this one was about anti-Black racism, and they opened it up to the public, or they called it opening up to community members. And of course, I took the opportunity to go. I wasn't a journalist when I attended this particular training, but I attended. It was a Saturday, and I met a lot of very nice people. But the things that I heard at this particular anti-Black racism training were possibly some of the most racist things that I've ever heard. And I've provided a lot of clips in this article, but I would happily provide the whole recorded sessions if anyone would be interested in hearing it, because some of the things that are coming out. So one of the things that we hear, so for example, here I've got slides about whiteness. So this particular talk was about decolonizing minds and the problem with whiteness in education. And one of the things that comes up over and over in the scholarship is that whiteness is not about white people, that whiteness is about systems, that there's a hegemonic culture, which is a European, Eurocentric culture. It has oppressed other people and it has to be dismantled. But they keep emphasizing that it's not about individual people, it's about the systems. However, when you attend these things, when you hear the members speaking about these things, I was hearing a lot of naked racism, and not against the system, but against white people specifically. So I included this in this article because before attending this session, I'd read a lot of the scholarship, and I'll give people the benefit of the doubt. If some people really do believe that these systems are inherently problematic, and you're a leftist, and so I can go along with you. I've met leftists. I used to be one. A lot of them aren't inherently bad people, so I give them the benefit of the doubt. But this training did make me very concerned that I don't think there are many checks on specifically anti-white racism. So this changed my mind a little bit, and I think we need to be very concerned about what is being what is being taught in these anti-racism trainings. So I'll talk a little bit about anti-racism later, what I'm doing with that. Some of you might be aware of Catherine Cronus' case. If you're not, again, I'll explain it a little bit. She is an elected parent council member at Ancaster High School in Hamilton Wentworth District School Board area. And has a she's of the opinion that the government, as in a school council, is part of the government, should not be imposing political speech. And she requested a number of times to record her objection to doing land acknowledgements being political statements that are imposed at the beginning of government meetings. And so she had a video that went viral. It was less than a minute, making that objection in a very polite fashion. And she was suspended from the Ancaster High School Parent Council. That was taken on by the JCCF, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, who said, you really need to reinstate Catherine. This is completely wrong. And eventually, very recently, Catherine was reinstated. However, during that period before she was reinstated, there was a meeting that was happening. So she got turfed off in May. There was a meeting in June that she was not able to attend. I attended it. It was public, so I went. And the interesting thing about this meeting, so this is the agenda for the meeting. They were going to approve meeting minutes from April 2025. So this is what she was asking to have in the minutes, her objection in the minutes. But when I went to the meeting and I introduced myself as a journalist, it was more than half an hour before the meeting started because they usually there's an online link, a Zoom link for people to attend. They cut that off. They stopped her from attending and being part of the minute meeting approvals about this rejection of or this refusal to engage in land, or at least this objection to land acknowledgements. So they really, really wanted nobody to hear this approval. So we don't know what was going on because as soon as they decided that actually it's okay, a journalist can be here, it's allowed under the Education Act, they couldn't get rid of me. What they decided to do is start the meeting by completely eliminating number two, approval of meeting minutes. So my presence caused them to not again approve this meeting. So I don't know if I'm making this very clear, but there's a consistent effort here at this particular school to stop any objection or any sign of objection or any notes or any public documents that show an objection to land acknowledgements. So there's a lot of sensitivity about these land acknowledgements that I think this needs to be scratched a little bit further because as far as I'm aware, there's no requirement, there's no policy that they have to be recited. So there's something fishy going on with land acknowledgements in school. And it's fishy enough for the school boards to potentially engage in unlawful behavior against their own policies. Okay, so we're going to divert just slightly. This is not Ontario. We're going to talk about Nova Scotia. So again, this FOI is not my doing. This is someone that shared it with me, and I'm very, very grateful. And I tried to do my best to express what was in this particular FOI. This FOI told a very distinct story. So Nova Scotia in 2024 went, or at least the health department went through a process of reforming or reevaluating their trans healthcare. And it was revealed in this FOI that, the usual things that you would expect. There was a high number of mastectomies going on. So young girls having their breasts cut off. That was and the number of trans identified people were seeking care was shooting up, especially the girls. There was a a sharp increase in the puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for minors. So all of these things we sort of expected to see, which was in line to what we'd seen elsewhere. But the really shocking thing about this particular story is, so on the side here, you have this is a report that was sent to their health insurance body, NSI. That's the health insurance body for Nova Scotia Health, just like OHIP in Ontario. And this report is showing all of the different trans-related health procedures or surgeries. And for some reason, there's an over 19 column and an under 19 column. Why over 19, under 19? If they're all adults, why not just have 18 and over? So I actually reached out many, many, many times to the people mentioned in this FOI. So that included the director of clinical care. It included a number of psychologists, surgeons, just anyone I could contact, the media team, over and over and over again over a period of several weeks, hoping that they would respond to me, and they did. I asked, are there any minors receiving these surgeries? Because, sorry if I didn't mention it, but in the yellow, orchiectomies, penectomies, and vaginoplasties, it's looking like people under the age of 19 receive these surgeries. What is that? That's bottom surgery. That is the surgery combination that you need to invert the penis of a young man to make a neovagina. That's what these surgeries are. And it's telling us that at least 5 young people under the age of 19, we don't know their ages, did get vaginoplasties and penectomies and orchiectomies. Okay. So we don't know the numbers of 20 parentheses ones mean there's under 5, so they can't really tell us how many there are. But they admitted to me. So the lady, the executive director of clinical care, Stacey Burgess, did respond to me, and she said, yes, actually, minors are receiving bottom surgeries. I haven't been able to get more information since, but I did also receive a response from the Montreal clinic. So Nova Scotia can't do all surgeries themselves. So sometimes they send people out of province and they send bottom surgery patients to Montreal to a clinic called GRS. I also contacted GRS, who incidentally, just this week, responded to me and said, no, we don't do it on minors. So somebody's not quite telling the truth. And I can't figure out who it is because they won't respond to my further queries. So I'm hoping, funnily enough, this article, I thought it would be massive, and it really didn't take on as much steam as I was hoping. I guess you can never really tell with the media. Some things take off, and some things you think will take off and don't. But what we're saying is minors are receiving bottom surgery, which goes against the federal guidance, which says nobody under the 18 is should be getting any bottom surgery. That doesn't happen in Canada. That's what we hear. It doesn't happen, doesn't happen, does it happen? But this province just told us it does happen. And one of the other things is the people leading the reforms, they were all activists. The activists were leading the charge. And I talk about that a little bit in the next article, just underneath here, where you see the Premier of Nova Scotia, Premier and Health Minister silent on teen trans surgeries. So in there, I talk a little bit more about the activist influence in this process. But if you're interested in seeing this FOI and reading it for yourself, which I think if you have a concern or interest in trans-related issues with minors, I've provided the full FOI in the second article with the Premier of Nova Scotia. So you can go have a look yourself. It's pretty revealing. It is long, but it does really, really, really tell a story in terms of how much was paid, who's receiving it, the number of procedures, puberty blockers, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now we're going to get into something a little bit more complicated. So this is an exclusive basically for PAFE today. Well, possibly not exclusive. So it was published today. So this is something that I thought might not have been published in time, but it's just published a couple hours ago. How do and I'm not sure how I'm going to explain this succinctly enough. On Saturday, I received a message from someone pointing me to this tweet here from D. Jared Brown. And what is he? So D. Jared Brown is a lawyer who has a case, a suit against the TDSB right now. So he's representing an educator who has a case against the TDSB. And he received advice from his opposing counsel that the Ministry of Education had put in place something called an order in council, and quoted a particular subsection in that order in council, which in the Education Act, that subsection here, it's 257.31 parentheses 2. When you go to the Education Act, let me just take you to the next one. There's a lot of information, but we'll get through it. It's saying that the Minister of Education has effectively given himself the power to stop. So you know how the Minister of Education has taken over several school boards. Uh, this is giving the Minister of Education power to cease all lawsuits against the school boards that have been taken over. Okay, but not just cease all lawsuits. Anybody who has a case against a school board that's been taken over must seek permission from the Minister of Education to carry on the lawsuit. So this applies to any current lawsuits or future lawsuits. It even includes lawsuits that were won but not yet paid out. So what does this mean? Usually means that the courts have the ability to decide a case. So if you have a suit, you go to the court decides you win, you don't win, what's your settlement, so on and so forth. And this is saying no, the executive or the cabinet now has the power to override the courts and decide who is and isn't allowed to sue them. And I don't know if this is unprecedented, but it's certainly very, very unusual. And I spoke to a number of lawyers this weekend to really understand what was going on. But it's detailed, it's a little bit dense, but this actually, the other thing that it shows that I'm going to move on to here with Bill 33. The other thing that it really shows when I was reading the Order in Council and the subsection that they're talking to is that this is heavily about taking over finances. So by the way, that lawyer, D. Jared Brown, was explaining it to me that in his practice, the only time he's ever seen something like this vesting order, is usually in bankruptcy cases. So this is all about money. It's all about finances. It's all about bankruptcy. Okay. There is nothing in here about curriculum. So this brings me on to Bill 33. So Bill 33, a lot of people are saying, I've even seen in the National Post, that this is going to eliminate DEI. He's going after DEI. And we see Paul Calandra's had some strong words against the politicization in the classroom and how, naming schools and so on and so forth. But what does Bill 33 really do? So if you read the bill, it's about investigative authority. So I told you Patrick Case was investigating. So basically, the ministry was investigating itself. So then the ministry is sort of investigating itself, and it's kind of giving itself its own powers again to do that in a complicated way. It's directive power or assuming control. So that's interestingly, this Order in Council is doing this. So the fact that the ministry is put in place this Order in Council without arguing Bill 33 is curious, because that's what Bill 33 does. It gives it that power to take things over financially and operationally and so on and so forth. Expense oversight. So, obviously they're in the red, so it gives the ministry the capacity to take over and balance the budgets, if you will. Mandatory police operations has been in the news. The unions and many schools don't like this. The trustees don't like this. And also school naming. So that's the only thing that you could maybe say is to do with DEI. There's been a lot of money spent on renaming schools, but it's more to do with the money spent on renaming schools for woke reasons. It's not because the minister has an objection to the woke part of that. Okay, so I'm hoping that you understand at this point that this isn't to do with changing the curriculum. This isn't because our Minister of Education suddenly wants to depoliticize the classroom, because this stuff is coming from his ministry. The requirements, the legal policies, the legal mandates to do this is coming not only from his ministry. And I'll take you back to Patrick Case just a second. When he was at the ministry doing the Equity Education Secretariat and at the Human Rights Commission, right? This is where it's coming from. It's the source is people like Patrick Case and the ministry themselves and the Human Rights Commission and the Ontario College of Teachers and the universities. It's not necessarily, the school boards kind of have some money to do their own, but if they were told not to, they would. Now, you don't need Bill 33. You don't need to take over school boards to change the curriculum requirements. Paul Calandra can do that today. He can change it at all school boards today, but he's not doing that. He's taking over boards for financial reasons. So I'm sorry if that black pills anybody, but I'm quite certain that we're not going to see the kind of change that we want to see in terms of changing law so that parents are informed, for example, or getting some of these inappropriate books out of school. The segregated graduation ceremonies, the horrible DEI training. I mean, that might stop if you're not hiring or you don't have the money to hire as many consultants. That could halt some of it, but then a lot of this is coming from unions, and they'll do it for free. So I'm not convinced that any of the stuff that's going on right now in Ontario is actually going to address the things that parents or people listening in this call would be most interested in. That's addressing the woke issues within schools. Okay, so what's next? I have this idea in my mind. I've been putting in enormous amounts of ATIPs, FOIs, whatever you want to call them, amphibas, to obtain information. Now, I only really started putting in a load of these in April, so it's probably going to take a little while to get the information back. I'm already receiving pushback. One school board, the OCDSB, the Ottawa Carleton District School Board, is currently in mediation with the privacy commissioner. What the IPCO? I can't think of this. Anyway, the privacy commissioner. It's an arbitration right now because they tried to charge me $44,688 to receive information, a list of DEI leaders, people leading these DEI trainings, and their invoices. $44,000, nearly $45,000 for that. So just to give you an indication, they don't like this information being shared. However, other boards have been a bit friendlier, so I think I will get some information. Um, the Equity Industrial Complex. Okay, so I talked about Nicole West Burns. I talked about Patrick Case. I talked about the DEI training and the invoices and things like that. I've been tracking a number of different individuals that keep popping up all over the place in the different relationships with other organizations like the Ontario Human Rights Commission. For example, maybe they're part of unions, but there is a network of people invested, their careers are invested in pushing this. And I want to find out exactly who they are, how much money we're spending on it, and what they're delivering. I want copies of the training that they're delivering to educators, for example. So that's my term. I'm calling it the Equity Industrial Complex, and I'm trying to unravel it with my investigations. And just to finish, again, this was very much about Ontario, but I would like to branch out to other provinces. I'm focusing on mine because it's what I'm used to, but I would love to know if you are in another province and you're seeing some crazy stuff. I'd love to hear from you. So this is my email address, and you're welcome to get in touch. Maybe you just want to have a discussion about what you might look into. Maybe you want to explain to me how the system is maybe working a little bit different in your province, and maybe you'd like me to look into something, or maybe you have information that you think would be really useful to share with the public. So that's it from me, and I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Yes, we can open up to Q&A now. I see that there are two new messages in the chat.
Oh, should I put that back up? I don't know because it's my email. Do people want to see the email?
Yeah, if you could keep it up with your email, that would be great so that people could maybe jot it down or save it. Because I actually had a question and this is relevant to contacting you. So if people would like to send you tips, this is the correct email address, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. And especially if they're from out of province, we'd love for you to cover all these issues across all Canadian
Yeah,
provinces.
listen, it's happening everywhere. I just happen to be focusing on Ontario. I mean, one, I'm here. It's also probably a hub. Maybe British Columbia is another hub for other reasons. But I would love to cover other provinces. I think that would be really useful because I don't want to give people the impression it's just happening in one place.
Yes, exactly. And we know it's not. We certainly know it's not. PAFE has been aware of these issues happening in school boards across the country in every province. And we know that very recently Alberta did an investigation into these books found in school libraries, and they found a lot of very graphic, sexually explicit novels, graphic novels mostly, but also I'm sure there are others. But the four examples that were cited were all graphic novels found in
Yeah.
school libraries available to children. And they're extremely graphic, but they're also very ideological in nature. So we know it's happening everywhere, and we'd love it if our supporters are aware of these things. Their children are in schools, and they'd love to send you tips. That would be great. My only other question before I get to the Q&A box is, how can people in this webinar and other PAVE supporters read your work? Is there a way to subscribe? If you could.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so all of my work, I work for True North Wire, but it's a wire service, so it gets picked up by Juno. So that's a confusion. That's what people get confused sometimes. So all my work gets published on Juno News. I do have my own Substack. All of my articles do go to my Substack. However, I just want to say if you're interested in my articles and want to pay for it, which I highly recommend supporting independent media, do not subscribe to my Substack, Melanie Bennet. Okay? Subscribe to Juno News and you can read them from my Substack, even if they're paid, because a couple people have bought subscriptions on my Substack and then don't have access to Juno News. And I don't know who they are and I cannot refund your money. So if you want to pay for it, again, I encourage you, but buy it on Juno News. You can go to if you're interested in my work, you can go to Melanie Bennet and it'll all be listed on there. But only if you buy it on Juno will you be able to see the paid on mine, is what I'm saying.
Great. Thank you so much, Melanie. And sorry, just to everyone, if you don't mind typing your questions in the Q&A box, you should be able to see it along the bottom on the bar. It's on the right. It says Q&A.
Can I take this down? Are we good?
Yes, you can. I think you can take down your email address, and I can also type it into the chat box. I saw that someone else did as well, so that's great, and people can find it there. So I see a few questions, and I also see some in the chat. But as I was saying, if you could just type them all into Q&A, so we don't have to go back and forth, that would be lovely. All right.
I hope that wasn't too much for everyone. I did pack in a lot.
No, I think it was great. I that was so interesting for me, and I would love to keep learning about all this. So it's a lot. It's information heavy, that's for sure. But we're getting really good feedback. Someone says, not a question, but thank you for doing this work, Miss Bennett. I have watched you on YouTube. All right.
Thanks.
That's one. It wasn't a question, but
that person probably heard me shout at Marxists quite a lot.
All right, we have another question. It says, what strategies have you been giving to parents to create change? What has been successful and what hasn't? I think that is more so directed to me. So, I mean, the strategies that we give to parents, I mean, other than a big crux of our work, which is education, and informing parents, getting people galvanized, and making sure that your people are aware, because you might be aware of what's happening in your child's school or in your school board, but not what's happening in another province's school board or other school boards within your province. And there are so many issues beyond even just the education system that impact parental rights and parents being the first educators of their children. So we encourage people to obviously remain politically involved, and that includes things like signing petitions, calling your school board trustees, but also your members of provincial parliament, your members of parliament. Outside of political activism, we have people, of course, write to us, let us know what's happening, because that's important, and we can share that with others, and that galvanizes people. We have had protests in the past. But things like this, webinars, education, and getting people really informed on what's going on so that they have the tools necessary to be politically active. And that is really the most effective, because the question was what was successful and what wasn't. Things like getting involved in trustee elections are very important, and writing to your trustees are very important, because that's like the grassroots work that needs to be done. Reaching out to your provincial members of parliament is also important. And then things can be elevated, of course, beyond that if they're like a federal issue. All right, so next question. Given the dangers of children indoctrination in schools with LGBTQ+, the cover-up to keep such efforts from parents, surgeries, hormonal treatments, etc., how do you explain why most parents are so passive? That is a great question. I think a lot of people don't know, unfortunately. So the people who do care, maybe a lot of them don't know. And then I think there, unfortunately, are a lot of people who maybe they're okay with this and they doesn't bother them. And as Melanie has been speaking about, wokeness has spread, and so a lot of people, it might just
I don't think people understand that it's as bad as it is. And I often feel like, that meme of that guy who's pointing to all of the things on a wall with all of the strings, conspiracy theory guy. That's what you end up sounding like when you become informed. But I think we just need to keep talking about it, because more and more people are, I mean, they're becoming more and more aware, for sure.
Yes,
I agree. I think a lot of people just don't, even if they're slightly aware, it sounds too crazy to be true that you can't trust schools or teachers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the majority of people. There is probably a minority that is within that woke subset of like leftist parents who are okay with all of this, and they're encouraging their children to identify and change their identities at young ages, and they're okay with this kind of ideological indoctrination within the schools. But I think that's the minority. I think, like Melanie said, the majority, a lot of them, it's almost too crazy to believe. There's some ignorance, or they just don't know.
Well, I'll just add to that. We're all suffering financially, and so a lot of people, they don't have the mind power, the brain space. They're raising children. They got to go to work. They got to pay their bills. I think unfortunately there's a lot of that too. They're just very distracted.
Yes, I agree. I think people having to free up time to invest in this fight is another obstacle, unfortunately. All right, so someone asked, what is the probability that the TDSB will ever release the Richard B report?
Next to nil, in my opinion. Yeah, I think that they are very, very, very invested in keeping that quiet. I I know I'm not the only one putting in FOIs about this. Even with my own news organization, multiple have been put in. A lot of activists behind the scenes have put in multiple FOIs from all angles. Nobody is getting any answers. They're doing their very best to keep it very quiet. Um, so I don't know. I just don't think it's very likely, unless maybe that might come out with the taking over the TDSB. There's a small chance, but then the Ministry of Education is still invested in keeping that quiet because, again, like I'm going to repeat, they're the source of this requirement. The reason that COJO was sent there is because the Ministry of Education requires it. So they have a vested interest in keeping that out of the public as well.
Thank you, Melanie. Another question someone asked is, they said, I'm thinking of running for a school trustee. How much influence can a trustee have, or is there a better avenue to affect change? If you are thinking of running for trustee, please reach out to us because I do think that a trustee has a lot of power to create change for good and have a positive impact within the school boards, because you can put forth motions and they can get voted on. And we need good voices. We have people who are obviously in the school boards with the sole intention of infiltrating the schools with kind of this wokeism and sexually inappropriate content. They're okay with this, and they're actually there are people who are activists, and activists, they're smart and they have time and they have energy and they are organized, and so we need to be organized as well. And so people, as I was saying, go into these school board elections and seek to be elected for these reasons, to continue to indoctrinate children and put forward these things. So we need good people on the other side who are going to push back, and not only that, but put forth good motions and try to improve the school system, because it's not just about trying to stop the bad, but it's also about it's important to improve the school systems as well. So yes, if you're thinking of running for trustee, please reach out to us. Another question is, are there efforts to eliminate the educational sex ed, change it all to higher grades such as grade 7? This person says this would be a
In
trade.
Ontario, no.
No, exactly. He
Not
says it would
even,
be a
not
trade.
even slightly. If we remember, Doug Ford ran on an entire campaign to get rid of the sex ed curriculum. Has he done that? No. And
No.
even right now, Paul Calandra, when he's talking about the politicization of education, is he talking about the sex ed curriculum? No. He's capitalizing on people like me, talking about DEI, talking about all of this like woke stuff. And it's in my opinion, it's a lot of signaling, because when you look at the documents, when you look at the order in council, when you look at Bill 33, none of that is talking about any of those things whatsoever. And actually dealing with these would be exposing the Doug Ford government for actually increasing the woke, enabling all these people. So I don't think without pressure, a lot of pressure from activated people like the people in this call, I don't think we're going to see change. We need more people putting on more pressure.
Exactly. I agree. Another related question, as someone typed in the chat, is if we're looking for school board employees to speak out. This person says they used to be a vice principal in the Thames Valley District School Board, and they retired in January and have been writing Substack articles about the problems with DEI. So definitely, I
You
think
should
Melanie
you
would
should
agree.
link me up to that. Yeah, I'm interested. I'd love to read a bit of that. Yes.
Yes.
You should
So
get in touch with me.
definitely send your tips to Melanie, and feel free to reach out to us as well at PAVE. We'd love to hear from you. And, we are looking for former school board employees who are willing to share with us, kind of as a whistleblower, what goes on, because without being in the schools, there's only so much that we can know. So that was another question. Someone did also ask, what is the Doug Ford government stance on the sex ed? And you just answered that question. He ran
They are pro
to
it.
repeal
They
it.
they're fine with it. They love it. I mean,
Yeah.
Doug Ford occasionally says something like woke liberal or something, but in fact, in reality, we look at people's actions, not their words, and in actions, these things have exploded more under the Doug Ford provincial government than any other government, including the Win Liberals, uh, and NDP. So they like it just fine. I mean, they're not going to get rid of it. That's why I'm saying we need more pressure. Right now, they're not responding to conservative voices or dissenting voices at all.
Yeah, for sure. And it's particularly egregious that he promised that he would repeal the sex ed curriculum, the radical sex ed that was brought under the Kathleen Wynne government. It was a campaign promise, and then he flip flopped, and the sex ed has actually expanded and gone worse since Doug Ford was elected. So back to the Q&A box. Do we have any new questions? Someone asked, next year is an election year in Ontario, which we know for municipalities and trustees. Will trustees be elected in the school boards under supervision? I don't see why not. Do you know anything about that, Melanie?
Well, right now, I that's the question, right? So we don't know what's happening Bill 33. I don't think it's been discussed or argued in the legislature. This is very specific to Ontario, obviously. Um, with this order in council kind of doing what Bill 33 was supposed to do, I'm not sure what's going to happen. So this is all up in the air. We just don't know. We just don't know if this is a signal to every other board, do as we say or else. We don't know right now. Okay, so I didn't mention this, but trustees at all of the boards that were taken over have literally had their devices shut off. They've had their emails cut off. You know, they have no access. They've been told very specifically, you cannot talk to your constituents, you cannot talk to the supervisors. They have been cut off. And so the it seems to me there's a very strong message coming out right now is that you guys are not only under the red, it's worse than we all think. That's why all these emergency powers are being put into place about bankruptcy, and they're cutting off the trustees in a very targeted fashion. So I'm saying maybe this has something to do with the trustees. So are these boards going to have trustees elected? I don't know. It could be. Maybe they'll do. We don't know what's going to happen over the next few months. But I'm saying what's happening right now with Bill 33 and with the order in council, if you're interested in educational issues and what's going on in Ontario, I would urge you to read that article to understand what's going on because we really have no idea. Like this is actually a big deal. You know, I don't think this has ever happened before, and certainly could very well be illegal, unconstitutional. And so we just don't know.
Yep, unfortunately, we don't know, and we will find out, I'm sure, in due time. But it's just an important reminder that the school board trustee elections are next fall, and we will be actively involved in that. So keep your eyes peeled, and it is important that parents be involved in that process. Someone mentioned in the chat, they said, thank you very much. And they said, from the perspective of an Ontario Catholic high school teacher, the war has just begun. So good luck. So it's always great to hear from teachers. And yeah, let's check if there's any new questions. And if not, then we can begin to wrap up. We have another question. What would be more pressure? So, and what can the average citizen do?
Make noise. All noise all the time. Listen, the activists that we're working against, they're very well organized. A lot of people think they're paid, and some of them might be, some of them might not be, but the unions, the activists, they are organized, they are mobilized, and they are loud. And so you can talk to your MP, constantly write them. You can, like all of the things that Celine said, but you just have to do it, and you do it a lot. Get people together, do it. One of the biggest things that these activists fear, you'll notice that when right-wing or conservative people organize, they call it a fascist takeover, okay? They organize all the time. They don't say that's authoritarian and don't get scared, but the biggest threat is organized single or group voices or communal voices or collective voices, if you want to call it that, from a conservative perspective, right? And it needs to be consistent. And right now, it exists, but I think it just needs to grow bigger. If you guys remember during the Million March for Children, I don't know if probably a lot of people on this call were watching it or participated in it at the time, but that was all over the news, right? It was across the country over a period of weeks. The activists were going crazy. They were losing their minds over people being organized, the fact that it was so racially diverse, religiously diverse. They could not make heads or tails of that. And then it fizzled. Admittedly, Palestine happened and all of these things happened, but all of that fizzled. And so it was just this moment in time that was putting the kind of pressure on the system from a conservative perspective that is required. This is what the leftist activists do, and this is honestly what we have to do.
All right, we have three more questions that I will take before we wrap up because we're already very close to 9 o'clock. Someone said, "What is the status of that crazy gender report from Western or McMaster University? One of the authors work at OCDSB, and is it being used in practice anywhere?"
Yeah, that's the trans affirming toolkit. I've seen it come across at one school board in passing. So I know that it's being used in one place, but I haven't really come across it all that much ever since. It doesn't mean it's not being used, but the fact is I don't know how it's being used. Now, with the barrage, I think about 80 FOIs that I've put in so far, I would say 90% of those are about DEI, the training, the slides, the invoices, all of that. It might come out in the wash, but so far, just with my normal, checking of things, I haven't really come across it. So we'll see. Watch this space.
And second question was that you mentioned $44,000. Is there normally a charge for FOI requests?
So an FOI costs $5 to file. And depending on the size of the information or the amount of time that it takes to search for the information and provide the information, there's a charge for every hour. So I think it's like $30 an hour typically. So if it takes half an hour to search for information, which the Ministry of Education charged me recently, I paid $15. Okay. That is unusual, but that's because I ask for a lot of things. So yes, there's normally a cost. If they don't find anything, obviously there's no cost, but it could be thousands of dollars, right? Now, this is a tactic sometimes that I have to argue with the privacy commissioner. Sometimes they use this search time in a way to kind of dissuade. That has put many people off. It could be $1,000, $4,000. The advantage that I have, and that's what stopped me as a private citizen before. I just didn't have the money, right? We had to fundraise for that DDSB. It was a friend of mine who did that FOI. It's massive, really important information, but we had to fundraise to get the money to pay for that. But as a journalist, my organization is one of the things about True North and Juno is they're very, very committed to exposing the woke stuff that's going on, especially in education. They are super committed to that. So they are happy to pay for if they, for these things, if they think that it's going to yield results. And my investigation is kind of connecting the dots. So I'm hoping that it will reveal a lot of information. So for example, I mean, if you get an FOI back and it's like $4,000 or $1,000, like there's no way I can pay for it. If my organization is interested in that information, we might be able to take it on. We would take the information, obviously, but we might be able to take it on if it's information that we feel would be useful for public knowledge. So yeah, they can be expensive sometimes on purpose, and it's a long fight to get the information. Sometimes 6 months, a year, maybe longer.
Thank you, Melanie. And the last question is, what can educational leaders do within the system to combat this, especially because there's a constant threat of discipline? That's a great question. And I also just want to add that someone responded as a parent from parents' point of view, and they wrote quite a bit there of things that you can do. So just if anyone would like to read that, it's in the chat. But go ahead, Melanie.
I don't know because I'm not a teacher. I worked in science before becoming a journalist, and I did this because I'm a parent who came across this stuff, and I was like, I can't let this happen. So I don't have experience as a teacher, but I've gotten to know a lot of people in the education system, and honestly, like if they're teachers here, maybe they have a different opinion, but I think your hands are tied. If you are in the system, I don't think there's actually that much that you can do, honestly. I think maybe leaking information to people like me would be very handy. So I've been trying to make connections with moles on the inside who can't do anything actually inside. But what they can do is that they can keep really good relationships with their colleagues and their union and all that stuff and not be suspect, but pass the information down so that we can start exposing this, because we need to put the pressure on them. They keep saying, like with the bottom surgery, it's not happening. They're crazy. It's not happening. It's not happening. But when we have evidence, when we have news organizations, and my articles can go viral sometimes, even within a few short weeks, we hold their feet to the fire in that way. So I think that's a really useful tool, is to be able to leak it to someone who will do it justice.
Yes, I agree 100%, because, even if, like you said, your hands are tied within the school, there's so much that you can do outside of the school that will make an impact. So that's why, Parents as First Educators exists. We are here to lobby. We are here to advocate and fight. So come to us and let us know what's happening in the schools. That's very important. Go to Melanie, send her your tips, let her publish an article about what's happening, because we need to expose this. But I also will say, I think that it's important to not lose hope and not give up on the schools, and not everyone has the opportunity to pursue things like homeschooling, private schooling. So if people's only option is the public school system, public or Catholic, it's all public, at least in Ontario. But throughout Canada, we have public schools. So if that's their only option, I think that it's important that we have good teachers, and I'm so grateful for them and the teachers who are aware of this, because someone said in the chat, not all educators have this level of awareness. Some just want to teach, and that's true. And some have politically motivated activist minds, and some don't. And I think it's important that the ones who do recognize the dangers of this, at least do their part as teachers to control what happens in their classroom, because really it's astonishing the amount of freedom that teachers have. They can do so much good and they can do so much harm. Teachers are able to actually teach the curriculum using they have a lot of freedom with the amount of tools that they can use. So they have the sex ed curriculum in front of them, and they can teach it in the most age appropriate way that they can try to possibly do, or they can go and teach it in a very radical way. So that's not to excuse the curriculum, but teachers do have some power, and it's important that if teachers, to encourage them to try at least to do what they can within their classroom. That's important. And I do know of teachers who have taken things to their principals, and as much as there is like this stomping a force of the threat of discipline that exists within the school system, I do think there are a lot of good teachers and potentially a lot of good administrators and principals still out there. So it's important that we support them as parents as well.
Hear, hear.
Would you like to add anything to that, Melanie?
No, I think that's great advice. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's not, that's the thing, is it's not all people all the time in all places. There's definitely hubs, and Ontario is a hub, not only Ontario, Ottawa, certain school boards, like I've been told that having a normal principal makes a huge difference to the entire school. Like if I take you back to that article where it says, what was it? The training, sorry, the Waterloo District School Board training, not training, classes, English classes that were replaced with social justice lessons. That teacher made a choice. That teacher chose to turn English class into learning how to be political indoctrination class. You didn't have to do that. A lot of other teachers will learn poetry or grammar or whatever it is that's related to normal English class, right? So I think you're really right on that. So yeah, there's some great teachers. They're possibly under a lot of pressure too from the small group of people pushing this stuff.
Exactly. Small group, emphasis on the small group. So anyways, I would like to thank everyone so much for attending, and we truly appreciate all of you. And we don't want to be the silent majority. We want to be a louder majority. So it's important that those of us who are parents, and even if you're not a parent, but you support PAFE, to continue to be vocal and to support PAFE, and to like Melanie said, if you have tips, if you have information, to send them to her, and to discuss these things with your friends, with your family, to those who might not be aware. So we'd like to thank you all so much for coming. This was a very informative and educational session, and we hope you have a good evening.
Thanks. This was
Thank
fun.
you. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.